You're listening to the Everything Went Black podcast.
Welcome to this week's episode of Everything Went Black. Karl and I kick off our brand new collaboration, The Savage World of Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan, as well as other sword and sorcery characters. We're starting off with his character Bran Mak Morn in probably one of my favorite all-time Howard stories, Worms of the Earth. If you're listening to this show, thank you for listening. You should also be listening to the other members of the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. Kicking everything off every other Monday, we've got Brandon Legion's Horror Wolf 666. Tuesday, Jackie Smith brings you Into the Necrosphere, the greatest extreme music podcast in the land. Wednesday is the first day of double shots. We've got, of course, Everything Went Black, as well as Iblis Manifestations. Thursday is Necro Thursday, where the Necromaniacs Horror Podcast comes at you. It's also day one of Soul Knocks, brought to you by Karl Hikara, for all things dark and esoteric. Friday, Spitball Media, a irreverent pop culture podcast. Saturday is a day off. It's springtime here in North America, so go out and enjoy yourselves. We've got the brutal summer ahead of us, at least if you live in the tri-state area. But Sunday, Karl returns for day two of Soul Knocks, and Karl and I are collaborating on Darkness Weaves, our exploration of the work of Karl Edward Wagner. And we're also, please stay tuned, we also have The Savage World of Robert E. Howard coming to you as well. Once again, thanks everyone for checking this out. If you want to step things up in your support for Everything Went Black, you can join the Everything Went Black Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get bonus content. For $5 a month, you get bonus content plus early access to the shows. And for $25 a month, you can become a sponsor. So this is a momentous occasion where we're kicking off the Savage World of Robert E. Howard. And we're starting this off with Worms of the Earth, the Bran Mak Morn story.
Yep. And that's it's been something I've been wanting to do a long time anyways. So originally I was like I was thinking, I could make another podcast just about Howard, but then with time, with doing Darkness Weaves, I was like, why don't we just do it like we've been doing Darkness Weaves as part of our, our own podcast? Because I don't really want to be running a second podcast. You know what I mean?
Nah, totally, man.
Yeah.
Actually, can you hold on 1 second? I just got to check something here.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Sorry about that.
But yeah, so it's cool to finally get this kicked off. Like, it's going to be a lot of fun talking about Robert E. Howard. Obviously, we're going to still be doing Darkness Weaves as well with the sequel novel, Legion of the Shadows, a sequel to Worms of the Earth that Wagner wrote. But it's going to be a lot of fun getting into all the Howard stuff, Well,
before we get into that, let's just do a little background on Robert E. Howard for the uninitiated. So if you're not familiar with Robert E. Howard, he's the creator of Conan the Barbarian, probably one of the most iconic figures in sword and sorcery, and by far Robert E. Howard's most famous character. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely. Conan the Barbarian is definitely I would say it's the character that he's most known for.
Yeah,
Between the movies, the comic books, you know, the Ace reprints in the 60s. I mean, it was Conan that really kicked off his resurgence. And was how we all pretty much most of us got into Robert Howard, I think in general.
yeah. So he was born January 22nd, 1906 in Peaster, Texas, to Isaac and Hester Howard. He was raised in Cross Plains, Texas, where he lived most of his life, and took his own life June 11th, 1936. He was very close with his mother, and after she had fallen into a coma and she was not expected to recover, he went outside to his car and took his own life. And a year later, his mother passed.
Yeah. It's it's very sad. It's unfortunate. One of those histories like unfortunate things, kind of like Wagner not writing for over a decade, right? It's like we ended up. I think if Howard had pulled through and lived, and kept writing, we would have gotten a lot more, great fiction.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he was only 30 years old. And if you think about just the sheer volume of material that he put out by the age of 30, it's incredible.
I think it was like millions of words,
Yeah.
that he wrote between his poetry and the writing, and so a lot of it is, like stuff like the poetry is just finally getting put in print. I think Robert E. Howard Foundation has finally published collections of just his poetry, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And, similar to H.P. Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith and, these people are some of our favorite writers, he primarily was published in Weird Tales back in the 30s. And, over the years, there were, various collections of his work which have come out. And, this Bran Mak Morn story that we're doing today, Worms of the Earth, is included in the Last King, which is a collection of all the Bran Mak Morn stories. Back in 2001, it was released by Wandering Star, and there's a soft. I was on hardcover, and in 2005, Del Rey put out a soft cover, and I believe that's the one that both you and I have, right?
Yeah, and for all of pretty much the Robert E. Howard stuff, we'll just be going through the Del Rey books because yeah, like when we get to Call, we'll go through the Call stories, and I reckon with Conan, we should just go through the order they have them in the Del Rey books because
Yeah,
they're basically like the best versions of Howard to read. Like there are, particularly now, a lot of his stuff's in um uh, anybody can publish, collections now, much like with Lovecraft. Um, the problem is like, you need these are like the definitive editions. Like they're published as he wrote them. They're published in their each book is set in the order that the stories are published. So there's no like rearranging the stories in his time in that like say like Conan's history, like life history,
yeah,
like they did with the Ace books. Um, so it's really the quintessential versions, which are built off of um essentially like stuff that Wagner was doing in the late 70s. He was pretty instrumental in getting the original versions of all the Howard stories published again.
yeah,
And I showed you the two books that I found so far. Like originally, how Wagner released three books that he edited in the late 70s through the Science Fiction Book Club, I believe. Those are the ones that I have two of them, two of the three, which I found at the bookstore by my house randomly. I was like I kept going over the shelves hoping the third one was there, but it was only the first two.
yeah,
Um, but uh, and then I think in the 80s with Wagner was involved with putting all of those out in paperback as well. That was one thing he was doing in the late 70s and 80s, and in a lot of ways, without Wagner's work on that, we wouldn't probably have these Del Rey editions. You know what I mean?
this is true. This is definitely true. And also just real quick about the Conan stories, the that the version of the stories that I grew up reading, those in the 80s, those one with the sick like Frazetta covers, they were edited by L. Sprague de Camp, and
And
they
Lynn
sort of
Carter.
Lynn Carter. So they sort of like had that, his signature a little bit in there. And then towards the end of those books, they were just straight up like pastiche stories that Lynn Carter and DeCamp had written. So
Yeah,
in my mind, there was like not a very there's a very fuzzy line between like Howard, his original material and what they embellished on.
right. Well, and the Del Rey ones are the originals, and
Yeah,
the Ace book, all those paperbacks, they did the same thing that the Marvel comic book did, which was they put it in a chronological order, and then um yeah, they the big thing that they would do is that they would uh with the earlier stuff when it was a mixture of Howard and their own pastiche stuff is that sometimes they would also like, and Marvel did this too, is they would adapt like other Howard stories to Conan. So like there's a s- historical fiction one called like The Road of the Eagles or something like that, which um independently both Marvel and under Ray Thomas and Elsewag de Camp and Lynn Carter readapted in their own different ways to make it fit in the Hyborian age, which is pretty interesting. You could actually kind of do that with a lot of the Howard stories.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, but then eventually, like the last few books of that series are pure, just basically once you get past the Conan the Conqueror, aka Hour of the Dragon, which was the Conan novel, the Conan the King novel that Howard wrote. Once you get past that in the original paperback series, everything after that is pure pastiche. And
yeah,
but yeah, and that of course goes into Road of Kings, which we're covering, which we just finished covering, which was like number three in that pastiche novel series they started doing. So, but Bran Mak Morn, they did two. There's two pastiche novels. There's Legion from the Shadows, which we're covering from Karl Wagner, and then there's one other which I can't remember the name of. Witch from the Shadows or something like that.
yeah. That one I
Wait,
don't know about actually.
yeah, Witch of the Mist or something. I have to try to track that down.
Yeah. So Bran was a historical existed in a embellished historical landscape. So he's a Pict, and his adventures take place during the Roman occupation of ancient Britain. And
Yeah,
Rome,
very
Rome,
embellished.
yeah, very embellished. Yeah. So Rome occupied Britain between 43 A.D. and 410 A.D. And Roman control over Britain was established by Emperor Claudius. And the Bran Mak Morn stories were somewhere between 200 and 300 AD, they estimate, and that's roughly under the rule of Emperor Diocletian.
Yeah,
So
and
there's just some historical context to the stories.
yeah, and one thing, so I've been rereading that book I sent you about the Picts and stuff just to kind of refresh your memory. Um, like Howard's idea of the Picts was very much had very little to do with historical
Yeah,
Picts. Like uh, historical reality of the Picts and the Scots. The Scots were he calls them the Gaels in this, which is accurate. The Gaels or the Scots were essentially Irish Celts who came over and kind of invaded the western side of Scotland, and then that was a little bit less populated. And eventually, there were wars between them and stuff like that, but eventually they kind of, became one thing essentially. And eventually the
right.
Picts kind of disappeared and the Scots took over. But the Picts are essentially just they're kind of related to original British Celts, like the Welsh. Um, Probably, and he kind of describes them as being coming from like the Mediterranean. This is a possibility of where they came from because if you follow migration patterns and stuff like that, the original British people were probably that, but um, the Picts themselves were probably actually Celts, not. 100% the Mediterranean type people that he is talking about. You know what I mean? Like he's almost describing he's using the name Pict to describe a as an almost older stratum of British, history essentially, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, well,
So,
also just contextualizing it with Robert E. Howard's world, like in the Cole stories we have Picts, we have Brule, the Spear Slayer.
and there's a direct connection between Bran and the Karl stories,
Yeah,
which
we
yeah
get to that later.
yeah
Yeah,
yeah
and then in the Conan stories we have the Picts, who are or the way Howard frames them up in the Conan stories, they're like almost like these sort of Native American style barbarians. You know what I mean, with culture, but very much like these frontier culture.
yeah, and they're kind of like in the process of evolution after 'cause they from their existence in the time period of Karl. One thing, if you read in this Bran Mak Morn novel or book, there's a story, Men of the Shadows, which was never published in his lifetime. I don't think. Let me double check. Men of the Shadows was first published in the Bran Mak Morn collection in '69. Um, he write kind of shows talks about his historical process, and this is before he came up with the Hyborian Age. So it's like not it doesn't 100% line up with the Hyborian Age per se yet. He starts to kind of go back and revise that later on. But he puts Atlantis as being or Volusia and Atlantis and Lemuria as being essentially like off the west coast of America, but at a time when before like say California existed. And over then that area was actually a bunch of islands essentially, like that formed Volusia and everything. And then some cataclysm happened and raised up the mountains, and then it created the West Coast essentially. And in that process, then the Picts essentially came down and eventually crossed over into the other continent, essentially.
Yeah, so there is kind of this concept that maybe the people that settled North America, the or Aboriginal people in North America were the same people that he's referring to as the Picts.
Right, but then he says that the Native Americans in Native America now were kind of a later wave, essentially, by the time the Picts already left. He does describe the Picts as being related to the Toltecs in Mexico, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little confused. Like he's trying to give them this history, but by the time we encounter them in Worms of the Earth, they're basically devolving for good, essentially. They're
Yeah, I
like
found that
becoming
very
like
interesting.
Neanderthal,
Yeah. I find that very interesting that like Bran is like the last, like it's almost like he's the last like truly human member of that society. You know what I mean? Like he has like the sort of characteristics of the older Picts, and the newer, currently his people are, like you were saying, they're devolving into these like, kind of subhuman,
they're
like creatures.
they're described as kind of like Neanderthal
Yeah.
or not even Neanderthal, like caveman-ish, like the kind of old school idea what a caveman was that probably isn't actually what they were.
That's an interesting choice, I think Howard made during, in the Bran Mak Morn stories to portray the Picts this way.
Yeah, it's kind of it's always been it's a little odd in some ways, when you think about it, like but they're not so fallen that the other people's like won't interact with them, but they're kind of seen as like really like savage and violent and you know Bran's trying to bring them back up, make them civilized again. He's part of the kings or the leaders have tried to keep their bloodline pure, but I mean, you get the feeling in the Bran stuff is that there is no woman left that he can marry to keep the bloodline pure. You know what I mean? Like, so he's literally kind of the last king in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
There's this kind of weird heroic doom around him in a lot of ways.
No, definitely. So, Worms of the Earth, it's not only is it a cool sword and sorcery tale, it's also I would consider this a horror story too.
Definitely, yeah.
You know,
It's
with
definitely a
with a
horror story.
weird fiction sort of folky bent to it.
It's definitely a folklore story before folklore is a thing, you know.
Yeah,
Like there's a lot of references to Lovecraft. Bran says, "By the gods of Rila or whatever," you know.
yeah.
He
Oh yeah,
says,
he references that. Yep.
yeah.
There's also a
And
Dagon reference in this too, I think.
what a big Dagon reference because he goes to Dagon Mir,
Yep.
and then there's Dagon's Dagon's stone or whatever is where the is where the it ends, the story ends.
Yep.
So
And if Howard and Lovecraft wrote letters, there's like famous letter writings between Lovecraft, Howard, and Clark Ashton Smith. And you know, Lovecraft encouraged Howard to use his mythos in his stories, so that's why a lot of the stuff appears.
yeah. And we already covered one of Howard's Mythos stories a while ago on Soul Knox when we covered the Black Stone.
Yep.
Um,
Which also
which
makes
is
another appearance in this story.
yeah. Well, a different type of Black Stone,
Yeah,
but yeah. The which I think is the only Howard story we've covered so far. So this is the second one. So
that's right. Yeah.
but yeah, this story starts off pretty memorably with a Pict being crucified in front of uh what's his name? Titus Sula, who's like the governor of Britain at this time.
Yeah. A fictitious character.
Yeah, fictional governor.
Yeah. Bran Mak Morn is in disguise, and he's observing this whole horror show here of one of his countrymen being crucified brutally and
Yeah,
suffering.
he's going under the name Partha Mac Othna. He's come to the Roman uh kind of Legion Center to do his own spying, essentially. You know, I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember which town he's supposed to be in. It's not London. It's one of the ones in the north, like York or something like that. But um, I'm pretty sure he's in like yeah, like probably York, I would imagine. Um, but yeah, and we want. He says like Titus Sewell is like the Roman justice is swift, you know, and Partha says or Bran's like, well, he was Roman judged him, you know, a Roman accused him of his crime, and a Roman is executing him, you know, like
Yeah. So it's kind of like, even harkening back to Road of Kings, where Conan was falsely sentenced. Well, not falsely, but like, sort of, it was a little draconian to sentence him to death for winning a fair fight. There's this idea that this Pict may even have been innocent of a crime, but the Romans had just decided that crucifixion was his fate.
yeah, he says, I and the accuser was a Roman, the witness is Roman, the judge Roman. He committed murder. In a moment of fury, he struck down a Roman merchant who cheated, tricked, and robbed him. And the injury added insult, I and a blow. Is his king but a dog that Rome crucifies his subjects at will, condemned by Roman courts? Is his king too weak or foolish to do justice? Were he informed and formal charges brought against the offender? Sulla says, well, you may inform Bran Mak Morn yourself. Rome, my friend, makes no counteractions to barbarian kings. When savages come among us, let them act with discretion or suffer the consequences. So, this is the inciting incident for the whole
Yeah.
story,
So
essentially.
yeah. So Bran, he's like completely like enraged by this whole thing. Yet he cannot do anything about this barbaric meeting out of Roman justice on this poor guy being crucified. So he devises a plan. He
Oh,
was to seek the worms of the earth, which is like this.
you forgot a
I'm sorry, go ahead.
section.
What were you gonna say?
Remember when Valenius, like, they try to give this picked wine and he spits it in his face, and Valenius just kills him.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's even more like, injustice going on between the Romans and, the Picts and all that.
Yeah, it's very mocking. And that's yeah, when he gets back he kind of comes up with this idea and he's with his servant Grom and he sends Grom to go essentially have it's a Cormac, but it's not the Cormac the stories, but it's a different Cormac that is also in Kings of the Night. Um, but he's a Gael king, but he's basically the king of the Scots, and they're allied. And he tells them to go harry the north, harry the wall, which is Hadrian's wall, I believe. And
Yeah, Hadrian's
essentially,
Wall. Yep.
yeah, and essentially to he wants them to distract the Romans and
Can
and
you
pull
hold
out the
on one can
legion.
you hold on 1 second?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm doing a podcast right now. Okay, bye. Yeah, sorry about that.
that's all right. But yeah, so he wants to pull out the legion essentially and distract them. And because mainly because he knows that Titus Sula will go to this tower essentially that is unassailable. But he has an idea if he can get the worms of the earth to help him, then they can take him essentially.
Yeah, and the worms of the earth are this ancient reptilian race that the Picts vanquished to live underground, and it's hard to say. I wouldn't say that they were human at one point, but they were more human than they currently are now. Like they were more by living underground, they sort of devolved into these like monsters essentially.
Well, what they are is they are the descendants of the serpent people from Karl. So they're the descendants of the
Right.
serpent
Yeah.
men, and they've devolved over time, and it's actually a really big part of. There's a lot of Howard stories about these creatures. Like a lot of his horror
Yeah.
stories deal with people going underground. I think there's the one with set in the Southwest where some guy goes into like these like mounds and encounters
Oh
them.
yeah, it's a Western story. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like two different stories of somebody having like past life regression into like fighting the worms essentially. Um, so it's a big concept that he has. He also calls them the children of the night. And it's a cool concept though. I really like this idea of this like you know fallen race of almost humans, that or like but are like lizard people. And they're
Yeah.
just
Yeah. They're
lurking under the ground.
humanoid, and it was sort of yeah, and you can judging on that going back to the Cull stories, the reptile people were more intelligent and sort of communicated with each other, and we're a little bit more humanoid than the worms of the earth, and we learn a little bit more about them as Bran engages in his journey underground.
Yeah, like at one point they ruled everybody. They ruled humans. They became sentient and raised
Yeah.
themselves before us. And that's a big part of the Cole stories is Cole um fighting with the lizard, the lizard men who are trying to take over Volusia again.
So the only way that he can really get in, figure out how to contact these worms of the earth, because his plan is that to employ them to get his revenge against Titus Sulla and the Romans. So there's a half worm, half human Atla, which is a witch that lives out on the in the fens there,
Yeah, he
and
stumbles
out by
upon
herself, in a secluded hut.
yeah, who he stumbles upon like the funny thing is he doesn't really know how he's going to contact them. He just knows that there's got to be a door somewhere. There's got to be some way. And he knows that they're probably out in
Yeah.
Dagon's Mirror. And then he comes upon Atla, who's described as being not not old, Yet the evil wisdom of ages was in her eyes. Her garments were ragged and scanty, her black
Yeah.
locks tangled and unkempt. She's definitely, in the Conan movie, that's kind of what I'm picturing. And
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Maybe that.
yeah.
Maybe that was inspired by this. By Worms of the Earth. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely was. I think it was a
So
reference
they
to this.
strike a
Yeah.
deal. So they strike a deal, and she's gonna instruct Bran how to get in touch with the worms of the earth, but he has one duty he has to do in order to secure her help, and of course she wants to lay with a king of men. So
And she wants
so
the kisses and
essentially,
more.
Bran has to have sex with her. Yeah, essentially, Bran has to have sex with her. This like semi-human witch, with the look of ancient evils about her.
Yep, and he does it. He mans up and he does
Yeah,
it.
you go, hey, you, yeah, dude, respect.
Yeah, and she tells him to again, I think it's let me double check, but it's like Dagon's like um tell me how she needs to go to Dagon's barrow. There's a
Yes.
stone that blocks the entrance, and you're supposed to go under the dome of the mound and lift out the center stone, and you have to go down. Dragon's Barrow is the door to the Black Stone, if you dare follow the road.
So once again, we have references to a black stone. Now, do you think this is the same material at the very least that the other black stone was, some sort of asteroid or interstellar object or something, some piece of that possibly?
There's got to be some connection for sure. It's obviously not the same one because the Black Stone is like the tip of like an old ancient like city
Right.
underground.
Yeah.
But what it could be is definitely the same material. Like
Yeah.
I get the feeling that what it is it's like a fragment of their old, you know, cities they used to make, from this like unearthly magical, uh preternatural material, right?
See,
And they just have a piece of it that they're worshiping now because they're so degraded.
in the Black Stone story, is all right. So that as we covered that one. It's the only other Howard story we've done, and it's the tip of like a spire of a building. Was it ever? I forget in that story if it was ever determined whether or not that was like a reptilian city or just some ancient city, some unknown ancient city.
I would imagine that it was a reptilian city because it has a similar name to the other reptilian cities that he
Yeah.
mentions in his other
Okay.
stories. I would just say through context of like other Howard stories that there's a connection there, so.
Yeah. So it would make sense that this black stone that these devolved reptilians are worshiping is, possibly part of this, the same material that came from the stars and, landed on Earth back in the primordial past.
Yeah, like some type of and it has like a power to it of some sort.
Yeah.
But I do think a big part of it in the story is that it has a power over them, that they worship this black stone. But there is also something uncanny about the stone itself. And so part of particularly this particular black stone is 100% an influence by the Arthur Machen story. Uh, I think it's called not the Black Stone. What is that called? His stone is called Exoxar. I think it's called the Black Stone or something like that. I can't remember. I'm like the novel of the Black Stone or Black
Yeah.
Seal or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
I
like,
mean,
why?
well, that's the underground races thing is a very much like a Mackin sort of, you know, trope, really. He deals a lot with these sort of subterranean like dwellers and things like that.
Yeah, and they're described as kind of similar things in the Machen stories as well. The kind of, you know, little people as he calls them, right? But it's like the they're kind of described similar, but they have this stone called Exoxar, which of course the Kenneth Grant picked up on in a lot of his occult books, and the occult book seller, or not even seller, the publisher Exoxar in Finland got their name from,
Hmm.
and it's from the novel Black Seal. And definitely, there's a lot of influence in this to that because that stone, this guy used this like professor uses it to try to like open a gateway to these on these like children of the night type of ent beings, and then disappears, and so I definitely think there's an influence of that on this.
Yeah, totally.
This part is creepy though when he goes down the
It's
fucking
the greatest part of the book, man. Like
yeah.
where he descends into into this underground labyrinth. And what I found most effective about this part is when he describes like the steps and how the deeper he goes under the ground, the more like the steps sort of have been wearing away for like smaller feet, and like everything is just sort of turning into this like essentially just like a hole, and less and the further away he gets, and then he's in complete darkness.
Yeah, it's like eventually becomes like essentially like a snake burrow essentially by
Yeah,
the end.
snake burrow. Yeah,
This is very similar as well to did you ever read the story from Lovecraft, the what's it called? The one where the guy goes up to yeah, he's like an archaeologist, like this breaks open this thing and descends and finds out that the ancient peoples that lived here were once these like crocodile, they devolved into like these
yeah,
crocodile people.
yeah. I mean that yeah, that's I forgot the name of that story, but that's like this is all kind of drawing from the same well, like all these different short stories and authors' interpretations.
It's something like the Forgotten City or something. I can't remember exactly the name off the top of my head, but yeah. And this part's really cool though. Like, and it makes you feel like when you see some of those old mounds and stuff in Europe or even in America, where it is like the old like we have mounds here as well. It definitely makes you think like what's down there, like
Yeah, totally.
yeah. In my mind, I'm like, oh, there's got to be like some like gateway to some dark subterranean thing. But yeah, and then what's cool though is once he goes through like the narrowest part of it, where it's the most snake burrow, like he goes into this like suddenly in this chamber that he can like lift his head up in, he can stand up in, it's big, and it has some type of weird uncanny light. And it's like the black stone is like emanating some type of weird like anti-light or dark light or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and this is kind of also reminds me of that Wagner story, 30-06, is that what it's called? The
Yeah, his little people story.
his little people story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his Worms of the Earth story. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely very similar. And yeah, the whole scene like when he finds Blackstone's cool because it's on like some altar covered in blood and stuff.
Yeah, it has all these like carvings and different symbols and runes in it and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I love this whole scene. It's just really really evocative. Um, this is one story I definitely feel like you could make a really sick like movie out of.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's I'm always good for an underground story. You know what I mean? Like As Above, So Below was fairly good. Marabito, you
The,
know,
the Descent,
the Descent, yeah,
which is the very Lovecraftian story.
but more so like Marabito in some ways. Like that story, that's like when that guy goes down into the subway system and into all these tunnels and whatnot, and then he actually finds like an area that has this weird luminescence, like similar to this.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that it's just this weird luminescence, like, and it's like funny that Bran just goes into this dark place without any light. Like that's a brave man.
Yeah,
I don't know what
yeah.
he was thinking. Like, he's just gonna go. What's
Well,
he
he
gonna
just
do?
fucking hates the Romans, man. He's
Yeah.
like he's had enough, you know.
I'm like, I mean, but at the end, that's probably what saves him from getting the attention of the worms. But
Yeah.
it is described that when he goes towards the stone and grabs it, he can feel like a presence in a room with him or something. And Here's the thing that's cool about the story is that he never fully describes the worms. Like they're almost like a presence, like shifting in the dark, and that's actually very similar to the Shining Pyramid. I think it's called from Malkin describes
Yeah.
them in a similar way where you can't really see them. You know.
Well, I was going to bring that up, like Machin's description, and also just in general Lovecraft's description of creatures. It's like very much like that's like an outline that your brain has to fill in all the gaps, you know. So
All you see is their eyes. Like all you can see
yeah,
of the worms are these like glowing eyes, basically, like Gollum or some shit.
and generally Howard is very descriptive with when he's describing doing his creature work. You know what I mean? And this I thought describing the worms was like kind of atypical for his writing because it left more to your imagination as to dream up this like nightmare vision of what these creatures might be.
Yeah, you just see like he just gives you like little fragments of like what they might look like. And Gary Gianni, the awesome Gary Gianni is like one of my favorite illustrators. He illustrates that part really cool. Because he doesn't really define the worms in his illustrations either, you know. Um, but I love that, you know, and it is pretty atypical from Howard because Howard's usually pretty graphic, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Bran like fucking beats it.
Yeah, he grabs a stone and pieces out.
Yeah, and then he to keep the stones safe because he knows that if the worms know, you know, if he keeps it, they'll just kill him, right?
Yeah, because
So
also the worms, I mean, the sense I got too is, like little people are all over British folklore, you know.
yeah,
There's all these tales of like, children being like stolen from their cradles and it's the same kind of thing in these worms, you know what I mean?
yeah, they're like except for the only difference is that in the stories of like the fairy, there's also other fair, you know, there are both kinds. There's like the kind of like worms style fairy, and then there's also like Oberon and you know, like these
Yeah,
like regal fairies. So, but I think in the whole idea of like the Fae as a whole, there are a lot of descriptions of these types of creatures like these things, you know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's not safe even though he pulls this thing out of the ground. Like it's still he's still running the risk of being taken in the middle of the night by these creatures. So he
Yeah.
has to throw it into a lake so that they can't find it.
A lake called Dagon's Mirror.
Dagon's mirror. Yep, there you
Yeah.
go.
And then essentially he goes back to um what the witch's name? I'm forgetting.
Atla.
Atla.
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, I got the stone, but I need to make a deal with the worms so that they get, you know, and I'll give them the stone back." And she's like, "Where is it?" He's like, "I'm not telling anybody, you know, like
Smart.
if you guys know, then you just kill me." Um and that, yeah, so this part is really sick though, like what too, like when they go to like back to I think did they go back to the place where he went to go
Yeah. Yeah.
down
Back into the barrow. Yeah.
and but they're in like the main part of the barrow and they're just like circling him essentially, you know what I mean? And she's like talking to him like in this weird hissing sibilance like that's like a pseudo language or whatever, you know, like that part's really cool.
Yeah. And what I find interesting is that well, isn't her full name like something like Atla Werewitch of the Fens or something like that? She's
Yeah,
got this like really
she's described as a were woman or a were witch. So I wonder if she can like again, it goes back to those stories of like these lizard people. I wonder if she can
yeah,
like
shape-shifting.
shapeshift. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the fact that she's part human too, which would imply that, these lizard people at some point in their de-evolution were able to mate with humans.
In some ways, what's interesting about this story is that Bran is like a more evolved like outlier, and she is the same for the worms. Like
Yeah.
she's like this weird like outlier of the
Well,
more evolved like worms. You know what I mean?
that's what I was trying to get to is that, like they're both representatives of these like fallen, devolving, races, really. Like of course Bran with the Picts, and there's lots of descriptions of how they've fallen, and Atla, who my assumption was that I mean, all right, maybe I was wrong. My assumption was that she was part human. She was like
Well, I think she is, but it's kind of
yeah,
like, but she's representing like maybe what they once were in a
what
way,
they
you know,
once were. Yeah,
when they were more
yeah.
human. Yeah,
So in a lot of ways, like the Picts and the worms are like
they're
on
very similar. Yeah.
they're similar, parallel, but on different sides of the fence, maybe. You know what I mean?
And what's interesting with that is that in some folklore, the Picts were eventually described as the little people. Like the Picts are described as being were there were myths about the Picts like after they disappeared from history that they were, these like what that's really where he gets his nowadays we know way more about the actual historical Picts than Howard did in his time. In his time, the reason why the Picts are the way they are is because he was drawing upon pseudo history and mythology and legend and stuff about the Picts, which was really all we knew, in the 1930s when 20s when he was writing this stuff, and the Picts were often described as these they were like the inspiration for the Hobbits in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So it's kind of interesting. So I think that it's purposeful. I think that Howard is purposefully contrasting them and going like, yeah, the Picts are on the same, they're going to become like the serpents essentially, but in a different form of evolution, or de-evolution, I guess.
Yeah,
But yeah, I just love this scene. Bran like says like, if you'll not get your black stone, and I'll cut down. There'll be a mountain of you around me. I'll kill all of It's pretty sick.
so the deal is that he'll give him the stone back if they bring Titus Sula to him. That's
Mhm.
kind of the ultimate deal here. With that, he strikes up with the worms.
Yeah. The he And so they agree to this. They're going to meet the next night, essentially, back. Um, not in this place. I think it's a Standing Stones.
Yeah,
They're
yep,
going to meet at Dagon's Teeth or whatever it's called. Like it's like this like kind of Stonehenge standing like standing stone menhir area. And upon the center of the standing stone is like a big altar. And she says that he needs to bring the stone and set it on the center of the altar at like, twilight the next or nighttime, nightfall the next day or whatever, right?
yeah,
And the deal is done. And Brandon is out, the next day looking curious, like how they're gonna do it, because he knows that some people just disappear. This is what he figures they're just gonna steal him. But little does he know, all of a sudden, like the tower just collapses into the ground.
yeah, yeah. Yep.
And he goes riding up to go see what happened, which is funny. And he's like helping. He's like finds a Roman who was like crushed.
Yeah, and he describes like how the onset of the collapse of the was it Trajan's Tower is where Sula was hiding out in
Yeah,
was the scratching underground. They heard these like scratching sounds, and then the tower was infiltrated by these creatures, and then the whole thing just crumbled.
yeah. And then they heard like a horrible scream, and they broke into Titus Sula's room and saw there was like a hole in the middle ground, and he's like being. They see him. They don't see the creatures, but they just see him being dragged down and screaming.
Yeah, yeah, and like yeah, exactly. And you don't, it's such a brutal like visual to read that part.
It's pretty scary when you think about it. They just collapsed this whole tower. I remember the first time reading this story, like being really like struck by that.
Well, have you seen the comic book adaptation of this story?
Yeah, the Savage Sword one.
Yeah,
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 that's a
yeah.
good one.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Didn't like I think Barry Windsor Smith did the artwork for that, didn't he?
Yeah, because it was in one of the very first Savage Swords, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
think Barry Smith did it. Yeah, great.
yeah,
Kind of like an underrated, kind of an odd choice for Conan, but I still like a lot of his artwork though.
yeah. John Buscema always been my favorite, but Barry Windsor
Yeah,
Smith did really good work. He was the first illustrator for Conan the Barbarian, and he did a lot of the early stuff for Savage Sword. And I do think that Worms to the Earth was pretty early in the run of Savage Sword. It was like in issue 2 or 3 or something.
Yeah. So
But
Bran has this whole, idea of that dueling with, Sula, like killing him, running him through with his sword, all these like this plan, but that's not really what happens. So,
no, yeah, he's like imagining, okay, well they're gonna drop him for me, and then I'm going to duel him and kill him like a man. And when he gets to Dagon's Teeth or whatever it's called, the other cool thing is when he gets to the place, Atla has covered everything with this phosphorescence. So when you're thinking about the end scene, the only light is this like phosphorescent, like swamp, like green light, basically eerie witch light, kind of like covering all the stones and the altar. And
yeah.
you know, I really love that detail. It's so so like cool, But they drop Titus Sula, but Titus Sula is a broken man. He's totally insane.
Yeah, just by, the his experience underground with the worms of the earth and it sort of horrifies Bran a little bit that maybe he went too far by using this weapon against Rome, that even the worms of the earth are like too foul to use even against an adversary like the Roman Empire.
Yeah, and he just like cuts Sula down, like kind of in disgust,
Like a mercy killing almost.
yeah, like he feels bad for him now. Like this man, he's like hated the whole story. Like the thing is, he wanted to fight him like he wanted to kill him honorably. He didn't want him to, he didn't have to like mercy kill him essentially.
Yeah.
And and this whole thing horrifies him. He tells them to like go back to to damns that curses them, and he's gonna like right away essentially. He says like worms of the earth back into your holes and burrows, ye foul the air and leave on the clean earth the slime of the serpents ye have become. Gonar was right, there are shapes too foul to use even against Rome. And this whole part Atla's just laughing at him. She's like cackling at Bran. This like king of Pickland, king of fools, you blench at so small a thing. Stay and let me show you the real fruits of the pits. Ha ha ha! Run, fool, run! But you are stained with the taint. You have called them forth, and they will remember. And in their own time, they will come to you again. And that's the setup for the net for that Wagner used for the net for Legion from the Shadows that will start. Is that very quote?
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. Yeah. Yeah, once again, just like a great story. And one of my top Howard stories, to be honest. Like I, read this it reads like a horror story, really, more so than a sword and sorcery tale.
Yeah, I mean, it's a horror sword and sorcery story. It's definitely more horror. Um, and that's what's really cool about it. I mean, it would definitely be in one of my top Howard stories. Um, it's I think in general it's one of his best written. Um, I think it's real works really well as both sword and sorcery and horror. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that basically after the story he kind of dropped Bran for all intents and purposes as a character, but you know, like there's only three true Bran stories. The Dark Man kind of involves him. Um, but at the same time, Conan came soon after, I believe, or Cole or Conan. Well, Cole is already around, and then he came up with Conan, and Conan was what sold, so he wrote way more Conan than anything else.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, this is pretty early, 1932. I don't think Conan was. I think Conan was written about a year later, right?
yeah. Maybe I don't know the timeline honestly.
Yeah, I'll have
All I
to.
know is that Brand preceded Conan.
Yeah, we'll get into all that timeline stuff when we get into to the Conan stuff. But yeah, I mean, and if somebody says like this is their favorite Howard story, I wouldn't argue with that. I think it's a really good story.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a good one. The interesting thing that I picked up recently, which I think is going to, I told you about it before, it's going to come in handy, is that there's a book out there called Robert E. Howard's Hyborian Age, The Complete and Ultimate Guide. And it was written by Rodolfo Martinez. And yeah, it's just basically it has a short bio on Robert E. Howard, like an introduction about the Hyborian Age, and it goes into just there's maps, there's reflections on each one of the Conan stories. There's also Karl is in here too, just because Conan and Karl are like very closely related. And yeah, if you guys
Yeah,
want to check it out, it's out there. It's
I-
hardcover.
I'm gonna pick that up my next check. And I just
Yeah,
checked. So, Phoenix on the Sword, the first Conan story, was released December 1932. So, one in November 1932, you read Worms of the Earth, and in December 1932, you read the first Conan story in Weird Tales. They were eating good back then.
yeah, yeah, totally.
Like literally, because I looked at this story was
Pretty
released in
cool. Like
November. What's that?
those Titan. There's like those what the hell is that called again? Like heroic. Titan's been publishing those short pieces. There's been some brand stuff that they've done, right?
Yeah, the PDFs. Um,
Yeah, heroic. What the hell is it called?
Heroic
It's escaping
Signatures
me
is
right
the
now. Heroic signatures. Yeah,
yeah they own they're putting them out. Yeah, I bought it on Kindle. Let me see. Uh, let me open
there's a
this up.
couple though, right? Yeah, I read one of them.
Let me see. Bran Mak Morn, Red Waves, Heroic Legends. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that one is written by I don't know why it's not showing. Oh, Stephen L. Shrewsbury.
yeah, those are pretty good.
I don't know if they put out. Let me see if they. It looks like there's just the one that they put out.
So maybe, I guess I thought for some reason I thought there was more than one. But
Yeah.
what I'm really looking forward to next, though, honestly, is this getting into Legion from the Shadows by Karl Wagner. I have not read this ever, so this is like my first time reading this book.
Yeah, I read it like when I first bought it a while back, so I'm a little fuzzy on parts of it, but yeah. It takes that final line as a setup, and it almost feels like that's a setup to another story, but Howard never wrote it. So
Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense that Wagner would go, all right, let's continue on with this, you know?
yeah. So I'm stoked on that. Um, that'll be a nice segue back into Darkness Weaves to wrap up the pastiche stories.
Yep. And then, Mike, I was messaging you. I think that when we get the next Savage World episode we should do Kings of the Night,
Yeah,
which is the other truly main brand stories, and
sure.
uh, just because it also involves Cull, and since we're gonna kick off into Cull, I think it's a really great story to show the connections between the two. You know,
Yeah, definitely. I'm down.
essentially, Bran is like a direct descendant of Brule, you know, the Spear Slayer. And although in that story, Cole says that he's shorter than Brule. So but yeah, so it's pretty, that story is actually a lot of fun. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's them kicking some Roman ass again, but without the worms.
So that's cool. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad we started this. Anything else exciting? I know I'm excited for House of the Dragon season 3 starting soon.
Yeah, House of the Dragon season 3 is going to be starting in what, June?
Yeah, it's
I
still May when we're recording this, so yeah, in June.
yeah. Let me go grab something. Yeah, I just got this collection, which I showed you the picture of, the Henry Ben Edom Trance of the Charnel Hearts that just came out. I
Yeah.
just picked that up.
Hmm.
Definitely gotten into the first story so far, and it's really quite good. I definitely recommend. He's a Finnish weird fiction author, so people just check that out. I'm gonna I'm gonna read that because I'm gonna have him on the podcast, and
Oh,
then
cool.
I'm gonna try to get through Monumental as well, so that we can talk
Yeah,
about it.
yes, yeah. That's a great. That's like I said before. That's like one of my favorites since either the Reddening or the Ritual. You know.
I picked up Sword Woman. I remember we talked about that
Oh
last
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I'm also gonna get Swords of the North because they're pretty different collections. I think they only overlap like a couple stories because Sword Woman has a lot, most of his like Crusader stories and stuff like that.
Yeah. We were talking about this earlier, and I just ordered Tigers of the Sea, which has the Cormac McCart stories in it. And I was telling you before, like when I was a kid getting into all this stuff, that was the one paperback that they did not carry at the bookstore I went to for whatever reason. Okay, it's because I got the Call collection, I got all the Conan, those like '80s, Ace soft covers.
Did you get the Bran one, the Bran Mak Morn?
Nope, I did
Okay.
not get that one either. I didn't get that till much later. Um, and I've kind of forgot about Cormac McCart, Howard stories. So then, I got the Offfoot pastiche stories. I only got one volume of those. And yeah, so I forgot all about Tigers of the Sea. I saw it in a catalog when I was a kid. There was like I forget the name of this catalog, but there was a catalog. It was like a newsprint thing, and you could pick up like The Stars My Destination and like all these, weird trade paperbacks and, stuff like Conan stories. And I, for decades, forgot about it. And I just now finally got around to buying it. So I'm excited about getting that in the mail, hopefully the next couple of days.
Yeah, I'm gonna order that tomorrow as well. The I found a copy on eBay for pretty cheap, but I said
Yeah.
wait till I get my check. And the I'm looking forward to getting that because like the thing, you know, the Swords of the North, which I'm also gonna get, has like the original stories that he wrote, which was two. But the Tigers of the Sea also has two stories that were kind of like fragments that they finished, and I just kind of want to read those two just for the fun of it, for the time period. I like some of those pastiche stories like that. So, and then one thing we both got is the two issues of what's it called, Chakal,
Chagall. Yeah.
Chagall,
Yeah.
which we probably might have mentioned back when we were doing the Kane stories, because this is where Raven's Eerie and Sing Lost Song of Valdez were published in originally.
Yeah, definitely. I only got the first issue showed up because I got it from two different publishers or two different sellers rather. So the first issue showed up today, and the second one is due here in a couple days. So and Chagall, there was only two issues of Chagall, and it's pretty awesome, man. It's like got really sick like illustrations, and it's just a really cool thing.
Yeah, the artist who did the covers was became now I just forgot his name. I'd mentioned earlier, but he's like the one of the big one of the most important artists for D&D for the entire history of D&D. Pretty much, he I think he started like he did like the cover for Temple of Elemental Evil, which inspired the front covers of the first two Burzum albums. He had,
Yeah.
yeah, um, which is pretty cool, and that's part of where you got to start, and that's how I found out about it because I got a new reprint of Temple of Elemental Evil, and they had this big interview with him in it, and they showed pictures of these covers, and I was looking at the covers, and I was like, the set, particularly issue two, that's a Kane, it's Kane in the cover, that's Raven's Eerie, and then I looked it
Yep.
up, and I was like, that's where that was published. Then I was like, you can actually get copies for good price on eBay. That's when I send it to you. I was like, you can find this shit, and like 40 and under, I got lucky and got a real good deal because they're like the seller was having like some type of sale, but it's pretty cool. And you said that there's like a ton of art inside and stuff too. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. Yeah. There's like a ton of illustrations inside, and really cool.
because yeah, I haven't gotten my issues as of recording this, and pretty excited to look at those. I mean, it's cool to have a It's like having a piece of history. Like it's kind of hard to find old copies of Whispers, but at least we can get these.
Yeah, I have a couple of copies of Whispers magazine. I have like two or three. and yeah, they're very difficult to find.
Did you get them at like a convention or something, or did you order them?
Necronomicon a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of cool like sellers there, and that's where I picked those up.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the best place to find those, like if you're at Chiller or something like that.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
excited to be going back to Providence for a Tombs show in the end of June.
oh,
So
nice.
that should be a lot of fun. I always like going to Providence, even if it's not Lovecraft or weird fiction related.
Well, just being in Providence is Lovecraft related since he wrote about it so
Yeah,
much, right?
yeah, totally, man. Yeah, it's one of my favorite cities on the East Coast, actually.
Did you do like the Lovecraft tour when you went for Necronomicon?
No, I never did. I just spent most of the time doing the panels and buying shit, and then there was like just doing that kind of stuff.
Because I know they used to do like they gave you like a self tour like where you could um go around like it was like a whole guide thing because HP Podcraft did that on one of their episodes like when they first went they talked about doing they gave them this like kind of self-guided tour where you walk around and see all the sights from a lot of it's from Case of Charles Dexter Ward because that's like
Yeah,
the yeah which is one of my favorite Lovecraft stories and a lot of that stuff is still standing so
I think I'm due for another visit to the Necronomicon. That was a lot of fun when I went. I went. It's like I went for 2 days. It was really cool, and
they missed a year though right
they only do it every they do it every like biannually. So like every 2 years they have one.
right
It's kind of weird, but I guess it makes sense.
I just hadn't heard about it in a while, so I wasn't sure if they like didn't do one year or something.
I gotta check, but it's a lot of fun, man. And especially if you're into all this stuff, obviously.
Yeah, it'd be cool. I'd like to go to that, like and hit Providence. I've never actually been to Providence, so
Cool
like
town.
I've just driven through Rhode Island. I've never actually like stopped there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like it's close to Boston. Like when I used to live in Boston, I went down there to see shows every now and then. And I played there many times over the years. And yeah, Providence had a cool scene, in comparison to to Boston. Like Providence's scene was always like a little bit more, a little artsier, like less, knuckleheaded, I guess.
Right.
Like the bands out of Providence were like a little bit more like creative, I thought.
I remember hearing that actually didn't oddly enough what's his name from Profanatica used to like do a lot of shows in Providence. I remember hearing him talking about it on like a
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
like
Paul, let me.
yeah, Paul Edney. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I might having trouble with names today. Paul
yeah.
Edney was like, I remember hearing an interview where he's talking about doing all these shows in Providence for some.
Providence is it's like a dark city, man. It's like Providence and Montreal are like there's just something dark about those two cities, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why the music scene there is like there's like more of that kind of vibe around.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think like some what I've seen for Providence is that it's one of the few major cities that still kind of has retained a lot of the older
Yeah,
look and feel to it, right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It still has like an older vibe to it. Boston used to be like that, but over the last like couple of decades, it's been gentrified, and like wholesale parts of the city have been like demolished and rebuilt, and that's not the case in Providence for the most part.
I noticed when I used to visit um a couple times when I visited my mom, I flew into Phil Philadelphia. My sister picked me
Yeah.
up
Hmm.
instead of going into Newark. And I noticed the Philadelphia seemed kind of similar, where it's like you're driving across the highway and you look across, and like the biggest things are church steeples, which I thought was really in certain parts of Philadelphia, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like I think Philly has like an old vibe to it as well, but then again, a lot in the last 10 years, I would say, at least 10 or 15 years, there's been a lot of like rebuilding in that
Oh,
city as well. So
yeah, because I haven't been to Philly since like 2009 or something like that. So
I was just there
yeah,
recently.
it's kind of a bummer when they're like tearing all the old stuff down. It sucks.
I totally agree, man. it just like erases, parts of the past. I think a lot of, especially like cool architecture needs to be preserved,
Yeah, and I guess like it's erases like the whole soul of a place in a lot of
Yeah.
ways because
Uh,
modern architecture, modern buildings are soulless. They're just like pieces of crap that are gonna fall down in 10 years or something. You know what I mean? Like the way stuff is built nowadays is not gotten better necessarily, and it's like uglier and like particularly out here, like when you're driving through the fucking suburbs out here and everything is just this shitty like, you know, like strip mall, like everything looks the same. You can go to different parts of the city and every place has got the same like seven stores or whatever. It just sucks.
yeah, no, I noticed that just like, because I've been like touring like since the 90s and, just over the years traveling across the country, you would see like slowly everything just got more and more homogenized. Like you would stop, back in, year two, couple decades ago, you'd go to different parts of the city, drive through different stops, different towns, and there'd be different things there. But now it's like, you know, Starbucks, the same gas stations, Chick-fil-A, you know,
Yeah, the same fast food
Walmart,
places. Yeah.
Target, everywhere. It's the same. It's not like there's no character to a lot of these places anymore.
And
You know,
they
they're,
and
they
they'll
like,
build them in the same city even.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, totally, man. So that's always been like an observation I've had over the years.
Yeah, it's like it's just and they just build more of it. And you
Yeah.
go the same it's just all characters being erased out of everything, you know what I mean? It's depressing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I like old places that still feel old, to feel like
Oh
they have the
yeah.
character.
Well, that's why I'm keen on like going to Europe because, there's like serious history there.
Yeah.
The United States is like going 250 years old, which is like nothing.
You know what? Yeah, the oldest places here is like Santa Fe, St. Augustine in Florida. You go to those places that people have lived there a long time.
Yeah.
But most of the country, 100 years ago seems old to people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the town I'm moving to in New York State has got historical buildings in it, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, well then I mean up there you got a lot of old. I remember my dad said in the town he was born in, Bethel, Vermont, they had
Yep.
this inn, which is still there, I believe, that was built in like the 1600s or something. And I guess like for a while he went back and lived there as an adult, and he used to work at that inn as like a cook or something. But he's like, from my understanding, Bethel hasn't changed a huge amount. A lot of Vermont still kind of, I guess, is still similar, but I've never actually been up there, so it's one of
Yeah.
my things I want to go up there.
Oh yeah, Vermont's beautiful up there. I love that part of New England.
Right, we still have a bunch of relatives up there that I've never met.
Yeah.
I just know about, I just heard about, but I've never met them because part of our family moved to Florida, and then the rest of them stayed there. And I just have never gone back. So my
Yeah.
dad and I were planning to before he died, but we just never did. But I've heard it's really beautiful up there.
Yeah, Vermont's nice.
I just wa-
In general, that's why I like living up here in the Northeast. It's just old. There's like U.S. old versions of things. It's not like Europeans where you have like a 800-year-old. You know, we don't have that kind of history here. But for the U.S., there's like in the Northeast, there's like 200-year-old buildings and things like that.
yeah. The If I ever go up to Vermont to visit up there, though, I will be thinking a lot of Whisper in the Darkness. That's for sure.
Totally, dude. Totally. Yeah.
Is it? Are they? What was the aliens in that one called? I can't. They're from Pluto. I can't think of their names.
Yeah.
The weird flying things.
Yeah. I haven't read that one in a while.
Um,
Didn't they make a movie? Wasn't there a film made out of that one?
yeah, the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, because they made Call of Cthulhu,
Yep.
and
Which
they
is
made
actually cool. That one's really cool, actually.
yeah, and that one's a silent movie because
Yeah,
the
silent
concept
movie.
their concept was to make it in the style of movies being made at the time. So
Yeah.
the story was written like 1923 or whatever. So they did it as a silent movie. And then when they did Whisper into Darkness, which both of those movies, the guys from the H.P. Lovecraft literary podcast, now Strange Studies,
Hmm.
they were both involved. I think um they're like one of the hosts is actually in Call of Cthulhu, and the other
Oh,
host
really?
is in Whisper in Darkness. Yeah,
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
and they helped produce them. But Whisper in Darkness they did as a 1930s style story movie with like a talkie, and they filmed it in Vermont too, which is cool.
That one I haven't seen, but I've seen the Call of Cthulhu one. I think that's
They're,
actually on Tubi, believe it or not.
yeah, they're all up on Tubi finally.
Oh,
Because there was a
cool.
while where you couldn't find them anywhere, and
Yeah.
you couldn't get the DVD either, and so now they're all up on Tubi and I think maybe Amazon and stuff. So I haven't watched them in a while. I definitely need to watch them. I remember watching Call of Cthulhu like when it came out.
Yeah, that's a great movie. That's great. I love
I,
that version of it.
yeah, it's really cool. But they're like really to the historic, like they're like trying to like really do the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is nice. Like, and it proves that you can adapt Lovecraft in interesting ways, even as a silent movie. And apparently, they filmed like a lot of stuff in that, like in their like a garage. So like the final scene of like Cthulhu coming out of the water, they had built like this whole thing in like Andrew Lehman's garage or something, so they could film it.
That's
So they
funny.
in like the same style as the 20s, like they built like a big pool, like a model that could get Cthulhu and everything. It's cool.
Yeah. Well, that's it for Worms of the Earth, man. So next up we got Legion from the Shadows, and that's gonna be on Darkness Weaves. We start that one off.
Yep. And it's pretty cool. It's like it's really cool to be starting off Savage World of Robert E. Howard. I've been wanting to do this for a long time now, so
Yeah, this one's gonna stretch out for a while, man. Definitely. There's a lot of
we
material.
we got a lifetime's worth of shit to do
Oh
with
yeah,
this. Like this
absolutely.
is never ending.
It's a big project. Yeah.
Like just covering Howard by himself is gonna take a while. And then, we can even expand it and years from now, whenever we run out of Howard stuff, we can always do pastiche stuff or whatever.
Yeah, there's plenty of that.
Yeah. So we got I am planning on ordering all the Titan pastiche novels because I don't have any of them yet. And I found on Amazon they're all like $15 now. So
Yeah, yeah, they're
I'm
pretty reasonable.
I'm gonna probably like every check I'll buy one or two and because there's like five of them or something now. So
Yeah. They're pretty
I want to
pretty
get all of
long.
them.
They're like nice sizable books too. They're not, you know,
Yeah, they're like
like they're
300
had,
pages plus. Yeah.
yeah, you're used to seeing these like just like 100 like 200 page novels. These are like 3 page books. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. The Legion from the Shadows, I read it. It's 250 or 40 pages. So I want to break down how we're going to cover it. And it's going to be cool getting into that one. I'm looking forward to that, particularly after rereading Worms of the Earth. It's exciting.
Yeah, totally.
But hell yeah. Hope everybody enjoyed this episode.
And we'll
And
catch you next time.